Hello, and welcome to Varn Blog. I've often said that independence is exactly that. It's the willingness to go it alone. But I've also talked about the need for collective action and collective conceptions of the self. And that latter part confuses people, but you learn who you are by participation with other people. You articulate yourself in the intellectual technology of other people. The fact you speak a language and it informs your sense of self and being is something that you did not invent yourself, nor would it make any sense for you to do so. An independent person knows that they have social connections and collective imaginaries that they need to believe in. But there's a limit to that because when you just have the belief and you just have the proxy for social connection, and I want to be clear in here, social connection is not something you can easily opt out of. Yes, I believe in freedom of association. Ask a lot of the groups that I've left. But I have social connections to family members and friends that I cannot easily opt out of. Yet we have a society, and I mean this in the strictest formal way, that has encouraged the ease of social relations. You become uncomfortable, you leave. Ghosting is prevalent for good and bad reasons. And this is the thing, many antisocial things emerge from good impulses. But irony upon irony abounds. We all know the liberals and leftists who talk about collective action, but can't work in a group to save their lives. And we all know the conservatives and libertarians who talk about liberty and personal responsibility and have none, show none, and support people who suppress liberty all the time. But there's even the more exotic forms. There's the communist internationalists who obsess with every forms of nationalism, not just ones against the quote imperial core, but ones that even are in the imperial core, because they think somehow if you support nationalism, it'll magically turn upon itself and become internationalist later. At least they have a theoretical conception for why that is, but historically, it actually hasn't ever happened that way. Or think about the libertarian who is obsessed with personal freedoms, but is also so interested in capital that they can tell everyone else's personal freedoms for it because they disagree with them and will support strongmen and unitary executives to do it. You have libertarians like Hans Hermann Hoppe who end up going so far as to say that feudalism is a good thing because it's the privatization of government, which, despite the historiographic categories being incoherent on that, it also indicates that maybe these people don't believe what they say. Or, as we see across the board, they don't have the self discipline to maintain any kind of principled set of belief. The exoticness of making a niche for yourself by exotic claims, which comes out of academia but runs throughout general society when people are trying to brand themselves differently, is everywhere. And the contradiction, the man bites dog of it all, is also everywhere. A lot of this is rooted in optimism and false hope, and a lot of people are peddling false hope today. There's also people peddling false doomerism. I mean, there's both there. Or my favorite weird category that somehow uh doomerism is going to work out well for you and you'll get revenge on the people that you like, ignoring the fact that the people that you are angry at are the people who are more provisioned to handle the catastrophe. And historically speaking, without large mass social movements that frankly don't exist in a coherent way right now, you don't have any way to enforce. I always tell people to try to have your principles and have skins in the game. And I have some principles, some of which are personal. There are people in groups I won't work with, and I will leave groups that I do believe in because they work with them. It's not even, I don't even hold it against the people that I leave with, and it makes me very volatile prone. But I want people to know that you do have to have a line. But your lines can get you in the contradictions and you can double down. And I've seen people do it over and over and over again because most of them don't have the social supports that are real and in their life enough that change their material and social conditions. I don't mean affinity groups that you just attach to because of your internal view of your own wants and needs. Those are fandoms. Those are not bonds based off mutual need. Most people's few sustaining mutual bonds are between people they work with and their families. Now, I've seen a lot of people try to spin a lot of things about what's going on economically in the US, and a lot of people try to come up with big pronouncements and grand theories that maybe someone's in charge or maybe there is actually some forethought. I think there's lots of plans right and left going on right now, but can you not see that after 15 years, you really do have a decayed social subject at all levels of society? And you really do have people who project their grievances within their same social classes and social groups upon the entire world. You know, yes, Virginia, there is a certain strata of people who work in management who are liberal identitarians, but like, let's quit lying to ourselves and pretending that, like, I don't know that most of the Trump administration doesn't come from places that got their degrees in the Ivy League. I mean, Pete Hegseth, of all people, went to both Princeton and Harvard. A lot of people think that populism is not going to turn on itself, that it won't. But without real social bonds, it is likely to be abused by someone who wants to build a counter elite. There is historical example of that over and over and over again. Even Christopher Lash, who at the end of his life embraced some strange form of populism after flirting with communitarianism and his own brand of Freudian Marxism, emphasis on the Freud more than the Marx, himself had trouble figuring out how to deal with populism because he saw populism as often degrading itself into vulgarity and also supporting counter elites. But at the end of his life, by the time you get to his last two books, he doesn't see any other way out. And he contradicts himself. And you should expect that over the course of a life. But these contradictions are deeply abounding. And if anything, it makes me highly skeptical of the current milieu. I keep on referring to it as like a milieu of cargo cults. And I mean that in a very strict sense. It's people trying to do in the past what they thought people in the past did to change conditions in the future by repeating actions that are no longer contextualized for them. They don't know why they happened. They just know that they happened. And maybe if you repeat them, it'll happen again. And you see this from people LARPing the American Revolution to people LARPing the 1917 in Russia and the United States conditions, none of which makes a whole lot of sense. There's also a whole lot of people who come up with intellectual eschatologies. And with that, I mean the study of the future. And theodicies, by that I mean the study of evil. These are both words borrowed from straight up Christian theology, but they're helpful here to explain why their projected politics never happens beyond anything that they did, are admitting that maybe that their politics aren't viable and maybe that they're wrong. I used to refer to this as 13 ways of looking at the fact that working class never had the revolution you thought it would have. It's funny because I have people who are reactionaries who think that I go through this because I'm some diehard, like hardened communist who thinks that we can just repeat the past. I mean, although a lot of these people also want to bring back the Habsburgs or the Czar, so who the fuck knows? As things get more disordered and chaotic, the temptation to both try to make an intellectual niche for yourself while also carving out a parasocial set of people that you feel like you have some support with, but you don't have mutual relations to. And I'm not saying just because the internet mediates your relationship that you might not have mutual relations. That's not the defining factor. You can not have mutual relations in person. You can join a fan club in person and also not share any common bonds of life with most of the people in it. Furthermore, we talk about the bowling alone phenomena, which is something that I both think is real but underexplained. It doesn't deal with the social changes that led to it, which was dependent, frankly, on a lot of women's labor in the home. Someone had to watch and maintain the household. That division of labor started declining with the end of the family wage. And the family wage is not coming back. There's a lot of things that happened in the late 60s and early 70s that forced a lot of people back into the workforce. But also, historically speaking, most of the population did not exempt a spouse from work. The separation between the management of the household and economics, as also politics, as what is a city but a collection of households, was much thinner prior to the development of industrial capitalism. Household management, including management of stuff related to the farm. It was an economic and social reproductive unit. That schism really began in the late 19th century and accelerated in the 20th. So everybody looks at the elephant and touches a part of it and realizes they only have part of the grasp. When it comes to things right now like the Trump tariffs, which will likely to have economic disastrous effects, how should we feel about them? Well, it probably isn't going to be the end of capitalism. In fact, the US has done these kinds of tariffs, usually to disastrous results, multiple times. These kinds of protectionist policies only have a historical track record of working on large scales when you run an already existing, not trying to create one, export economy, and you are at the early stages of industrialization, and you need to be in a country that has most of the mineral and agricultural resources that it needs. And unfortunately, there is no country on earth today that has all the mineral and agricultural resources that it would need to run a modern technological economy. I believed in this stuff. I came out of the protest at Battle of Seattle in the late 90s. I had to talk about how it led to me to being a paleo conservative because I really wanted to believe that you could nationally handle this stuff and rationalize it and deal with it. And we've also wanted to believe that larger forces were inherently rational and that nobody would do anything that had great disastrous uh implications as a mass group, Or we like to believe that we're special and exempted from mass hysterias and general social sentiments. I hate to tell you, but you're not, and you're not. You are not exempted. You are not special. Neither am I. You can have principles and you can develop yourself, and you need to develop people that you have actual social relations with, both chosen and non chosen. Your groups, your tendencies, what you do needs to come out of that. Like tenants unions, which admittedly do not have the leverage that labor unions have, but also don't have the baggage. And labor unions are usually the baseboard of how you start to organize these kinds of social movements. Why? Because you can stop production, and because you have real experiences in a common life in reality. But one of the things we have to deal with is the centralization of technology has decentralized labor. And I don't mean decentralize it from its crucial place in society. All this is still running on very real, very physical labor. The problem with all the techno neo feudalist thesis is it acts like you could just sit at home and chip mine all day and not do anything. Someone still got to grow your food, and someone still got to get the technology built and maintain the servers and get the water there. Furthermore, rentierism isn't new to capitalism. There's kind of a universal tendency that large capitalists want to stabilize their income because profits are always in flux to go to rents. This, however, is kind of contradicted by the fact that the rents need a strong state to enforce them, and that very strong state's going to want more of that productive capacity. This gets expressed in currency, but thinking about it in terms of money is actually an illusion because money can always shift around. Are you talking about credit money, currency money, as in what you have to pay taxes in, or commodity money when you're trading commodities? And people move back and forth between these things all the fucking time. None of them also are free to maintain, they all have a cost of maintenance. So why do people keep on going crazy in these weird ideological ways? Well, they live in a society that increasingly seems decayed, that decay is now being actively dismantled with seemingly no realistic plan on how to build it back up. You want to reshore a bunch of factories when you need to buy the machine parts and the minerals from China? Have you thought this through? No one has. And one of the things that I think should horrify people is maybe this social subject is decayed, not just at the level of obvious poverty when people are going in and out of quasi limpid lifestyles, et cetera, but also at all levels. And they've been justifying their decay through moral appeals as opposed to competence. And that's not just applied to liberals, although I think it is somewhat obvious with them. It also definitely applies to conservatives who will cloak themselves in God and country while completely undoing everything those things supposedly stand for. But liberals do it too. They talk about equity all the time and live in the most unequitable parts of the United States and are dependent on services that are super unequitable. Education, higher ed, is one of the most unequitable parts of society, period. It is a medieval conception rationalized under neoliberal capitalism and Fordist capitalism and even entrepreneurial capitalism as a way to outsource their own development of the general intellect, but privatize it. Its primary focus is to sort people as much as it is to educate them. I know you want to believe there was a time when that wasn't a case. When that wasn't the case, universities did not have mass enrollment. So you go to the bastions of the sources of inequality. inequality to have them talk about equality. The most talk about that stuff happens at the most elite universities, who were also, as we've already noted, basically head funds and hospital rentiers that just happen to have his students go to it for historical reasons. That's who's supposed to protect equity, racial and otherwise? That doesn't seem ludicrous to you? I've talked about the guru principle and the way there's so many people, and this video will probably come out before the video I actually didn't know that talks about, who believe absurd and contradictory things as proof of their loyalty. This is not new. This is basically a high cost way of signaling that you belong to the group, is to hold two incoherent principles at a time. But when the entire society operates like that, how can you blame people for being conned in that way? No. To bring it back, I think today you need independence. I don't think that needs to be based off of hope. I don't think it needs to be based off of partisan allegiance. I mean, it's not just the Republicans who screw their base, is it? How many Democratic war presidents have there been? Well, Democrats also led the anti-war movement. How absurd is it that you had the Cheneys backing Kamala Harris, or Bill Kristol celebrating Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? A wrong life can't be lived rightly, and I say it over and over again. If you want to fix this, you have to have principles, and you have to build stuff with people you have skin in a real game with. The LARPing, everyone can accuse everybody else of it because we all do it. You don't know what's a LARP or what isn't a LARP until it succeeds or fails. January 6th and all those protests were largely a LARP until they weren't. How serious they were is a different question, but they did become something more than that. BLM, frankly, in a lot of ways was the same way, although it started as something real and became more of a LARP. Different trajectory. Occupy, similar thing. And a lot of what you guys call LARPing isn't even that. It's role-playing fandoms, a massive online scenarios without even the social connections of pretending something prefigurative like a LARP. Now, I get told I'm sententious, I am. I get told I'm combative, I am. I'm not particularly tolerant in a lot of ways. So, I am taking my own independence a lot more seriously. I work with groups that share a common life with me and little else. Hopefully, those groups can consolidate and work with each other over time with a larger vision. The move from the in itself to the for itself, but no amount of prattling about optimism or hope or how things are just going to come out good in the end. It's going to change the situation. Pessimism is not nihilism. Nihilism is not quietism. Defeatism is not pessimism. These things should be separate categories. They might seem related, but they're not. I'm not a defeatist, but I am a pessimist. The odds are never good for a lot of what people want to do. Nor do I think we can predict the future, but I can say we say what the odds are. When we pretend that there's no odds, we're nuts. But sometimes our priors are off, and our priors have been very much off lately. All of our priors have. Anyway, Protect your peace. Keep your independence and keep your your cleanness of mind. And by that I mean think through the things you say and try to hold yourself to principles, because people will try to take advantage of the fact that you don't, and you make a quick bid for power. You're usually ceding your power to somebody else. Don't do it.